Hello, in this video I will show you how to use slicers in Google Sheets when working with pivot tables. In this data file, I have a list of students who are enrolled in a graduate program or have been enrolled in a graduate program. So this data file helps me keep track of student progress a long time. But this is just a fictitious data, so none of this information is real. I used a random name generator to generate student names. I did the same thing to generate some names for students' advisors. And then I also created some fictitious uh, email addresses and generated random phone numbers for these students just to illustrate what this type of file will look like. And then for each student, um, I specified the enrollment semester and the enrollment year, their current status, whether they're graduated or their active students have been deferred or withdrawn or are inactive. Then I randomly generated some GPA values and specified whether they defended their proposal, and if so, when they defended the proposal, and whether they defended their final thesis, and if so, when did they do so. So here it is, a typical data file that we sometimes use to keep track of student progress. Of course, real files may include some additional information, but this is just an example. So let's say that I want to create a dashboard that summarizes information about this graduate program and student progress in this program. And so to do that, I created another sheet here. I called it dashboard. So this is what it looks like right now. I just have a title typed in here. But let's say that I want to start working on this dashboard by including a pivot table that summarizes the number of students assigned to each advisor, right? This is an important information that I want to continuously monitor because we want the workload to be evenly distributed across professors and make sure that some individuals are not overwhelmed with a great number of students while others only have a few students. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my data, and just for flexibility, I am going to select my entire data file, which looks like I already did. So all of the columns here are selected, and then all the way down. This way, if I select everything while I'm typing new data, let's say new students are enrolling, or if I'm making changes, all of these changes or additions will be reflected in my pivot table. So I have everything that I need selected. So I'm going to click on Insert and then click on Pivot Table. And as you can see, Google Sheets is asking me where I want to locate this pivot table. Since I already created a sheet for this, I'm going to use an existing sheet, which again I named Dashboard and exclamation mark. This is the convention. And then I have to specify where I want this located on this sheet. So I'm going to look at it, and let's say that I want to leave some space maybe for some other information in the next few rows here. So I'm going to select maybe A10. So I'm going to begin at cell A10. So this would be the upper left corner of the table. And then I'm going to click Create. And so here is my table. Now I have to specify which variables I want to use in the rows and in the values. So to do that, I am going to go on the right side in the pivot table editor, and then click on Add. And again, I want to use advisor because I want to summarize information by advisor, and right away I'm getting a list of all of the advisors in the data set. So remember, these are the it's almost like a unique function, right? Each name is listed here only once, even though it occurs multiple times in the data set. One thing that I notice here is that I also have the blank space. This is because I selected the entire data all the way down, where even in rows where I didn't have anything entered yet. So one thing that I can do, a trick that I can use to eliminate the blank space, is to add a filter by advisor, which is the variable that I used. And then here, as you know, you can select which advisors you want to include. And I want to include everybody for now, except for the blank values. So here it is. Now, the information listed here is referring only to the fields where a name was typed in the advisor field. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, I want the number of students per advisor, right? So that means that in the values field, I have to add, and I can add, let's say, student name. This is automatically going to count the names that show up for each advisor. Okay, so now I can see the number of students listed for each advisor. I see that they're relatively equal, so very similar, just between 8 and 9 students per advisor, to a total of 101 students overall. But of course, this refers to all of the students, right? So all of the some of the students have graduated, some are inactive or have withdrawn. So maybe I want to see all that information here to make a more informed decision when I am assigning students to a specific advisor. So to do that, I can go to the columns field here and then add some more information, and I can add information based on student status. And student status has these possible values: active, deferred, dismissed, graduated, inactive, withdrawn, and grand total. So see, grand total stays the same, but the number of active students is very different, right? For instance, I see that this person has only 2, while the other ones have 4 or 3 students. So this is very informative as well. So this is my pivot table. What I wanted to point out is that with pivot tables, we can use slicers, which is another way to filter the data. I will show you how to do that. First, I'm going to select the table that I want to use, and then I'm going to click on data and then add a slicer. And here it is. The slicer is placed here. I can move it out of the way, so I'm just going to put it on top. This is, as I mentioned before, it's like a filter, but it's a filter that is a lot easier to use than the filters that we have in the pivot table editors here on the right side. This type of filter can be used by any users. They're very intuitive. The filters that we have on the right side in the pivot table editor require a little bit of knowledge on where to find them, how to select them, and so on. So we have to be familiarized with pivot tables to use filters from the pivot table editor. So this is a lot more user friendly. So the first step is to select a column. Slicers can only use one column at a time. So let's click on selecting a column. And as you can see here on the right side, the 2 types of columns that I have are there are two types of information used in these table are the count of student names and the student status, right? So let's use the count of student names here. And once I did that, it applies this filter. And if we click on the drop down menu, you can see that you can select or check the advisors that you want to include and the advisors that you want to exclude from the table. For instance, let's say that I only want to include some of the advisors, maybe a specific group of advisors that are in a specific department, let's say. So I'm going to click here, and here we go. We only have these names here and the students that these professors are advising. So another thing that you can do with Slicer is to edit the title. You select the slicer and then click on customize, and here in the title area you can change it. I want to use something that's a lot more user friendly, or something that is easy to understand by anyone. So I want to just use count of students by advisor and by status. Student status, to make it more clear. So after I'm doing this, you can see that the title has been updated. All I have to do is maybe drag it a little bit to make it more visible. And again, anybody who is looking at this dashboard can select the options that they want from here and change the table as needed. There are other options for filtering. As you can see, you can filter by condition, which means selecting values from the data source when the cells are empty or not empty, or contain certain expressions. If we're working with date values, we can look at dates before a certain point in time or dates after a certain point in time. If we're looking with numerical value, we can also filter those using expressions such as greater than or less than, or specifying certain interval, or even specifying a specific formula. So there are lots of ways to filter data. The only limitation I would say is that you can only filter using one column at a time. For instance, here I may not want to look at the students who have already graduated, right? This was in the past. It is more of more interest to me to have a table that shows the students who are currently working on their degree. So if I want to use another filter, I can add it here in the pivot table editor. Let's say I'm adding another filter by student status here. And if I click on the drop down arrow, I see all the possible options. And let's say I only want to include the students who are still working on their degrees, such as active, deferred, not dismissed, not graduated, or inactive, because these may still be reinstated. So, and not the withdrawn. So, and then if I click OK, you can see I only have these three columns. So that's another option too. So but for now, I'm just going to leave everything in here. So this is how you create a pivot table and use slicers with pivot tables. in Google Sheets. These are again very useful when creating dashboards because they allow some interaction of the users with the data.